So now that Tim the Tap Man has a win in Fall Guys, I can get back to the rest of my life. Let's talk about the Bucks and the Lakers. They both lost their first games. I don't think either team is going to lose their first round series. I mean, hell, in that Blazers-Lakers prediction video, I even said I could see the Blazers winning game 1. But even so, I think there's some things to talk about with both of these teams. We can start with the Lakers. So, the shooting is the biggest fear right now with the Lakers. I mean, they didn't shoot well from outside in the bubble, and they were really bad last night. What were they? They were 5 for 32 from outside. That's 16% from 3. They were also 64% from the free throw line. Yeah, call me crazy, but it's tough to win when you're just simply not making shots like that. And while I don't think we should expect them to shoot 16% from outside, I do fear that this could be a bit of a trend to where maybe they're shooting, I don't know, high 20s, low 30s some games rather than into the mid 30s consistently. Because you just go down the roster and there's just not great shooters on this team. There's good ones, but there's not any JJ Redick or Duncan Robinson or Davis Bertans or Klay Thompson or Buddy Hield. There's just not a guy like that. I mean, I think, Dion played 1 minute, and maybe he'll find some time. I mean, Caruso played 30, Kuzma was at 30, Morris was at 19. Maybe you just distribute the wealth a little bit more if you are Frank Vogel. But there's still reason to be skeptical of Dion. We all know his shot selection and things like that, but it's tough. Now, the other thing about the shooting to make note of is that AD was 0 for 5 from outside, and it's mainly because when he plays power forward and he's next to centers, it's just not as much space around the rim. Now, AD was able to make that work the whole season, but we saw what it can look like when it's bad, and that was last night. I mean, teams are going to give AD that shot all day. And I think an interesting thing that happened last night was the Blazers went to the Nurkic-Whiteside lineup, and I think if you're the Lakers, if you are willing to give up some size and throw AD at the 5 and force Whiteside or Nurkic to defend on the perimeter, then I think you can have a lot of success. And if we take that out to just future series, if the Lakers, I still think they're going to win this series, but like against Houston, can you really play two bigs against the Rockets like that? I don't know. I mean, can JaVale and Dwight survive in that type of a series against the Clippers when they put 4 guys who can shoot out there? I just feel like teams are going to force them to go to AD at center anyway. They did run with AD at the 5 the last 3 or 4 minutes or whatever. I think you just simply have to do it more. Now, another thing I have seen is this idea of, well, if the threes aren't going in, then do something else. My reply to that is, what is that something else? I mean, you want Danny Green to shoot a mid-range? Like LeBron and AD work around the basket, and you need shooters around them so they have room to operate, and then the ball ends up in that shooter's hand. What's he going to do, go off the dribble? Like, the personnel here is not equipped to do that. So, I mean, this is what you're going to get. You're going to get three-point shooting, and hopefully it's just going to go in. Now, of course, there's some times when you can attack a closeout or whatever, but this idea of, well, the threes aren't going in, do something else. There is no something else, man. It's 2020 NBA. They go in or they don't. Now, let's talk about LeBron a little bit. So, I don't think it was on him that they lost last night. Could you argue that he looks a little slow sometimes or a little hesitant to drive just possession after possession? Sure. I'm still not going to put any of the blame on him. I mean, when you get 23 points and 16 assists, like, is it really your fault if you lost? I mean, I guess if you missed 1 million shots and committed 1 million turnovers, but that didn't really happen either. I mean, he went 1 for 5 from 3, 4 for 7 from the free throw. It wasn't perfect for LeBron, but LeBron was fine. But am I concerned by the fact that LeBron is clearly not just attacking the basket whenever he wants to, like we've seen him do for the majority of his career? A little bit. Whether that's he just simply can't do it every possession, I don't know. I mean, the thing that I would like to see, besides just the obvious of more LeBron AD pick and rolls, especially with the shooting around them and no other big guy, is like some really high screens for LeBron to where he can just kind of get that running start going. Anyway, that's the case for the Lakers. I think there's kind of like all the things that are kind of iffy with the Lakers we pretty much saw in game one. Of course, Portland had something to do with this game as well. Damian Lillard. He's Damian Lillard. There you go. Now let's talk about the Bucks. So, I think we saw a bit of what can go wrong with the Bucks' defensive strategy, which is, of course, defend the paint like crazy and will live with a couple of extra threes. Well, they got killed for it this time around. Vucevic made a whole bunch of pick-and-pop mid-rangers. He made a bunch of threes as well. He had a couple of post-up opportunities, but that wasn't his main thing. And this is just something that's going to happen to the Bucks sometimes. The funny thing is that because of injuries, Orlando was forced to put more shooting out there than they typically have. And you think about that with the teams that can put a lot of shooters out there. I mean, the Raptors, especially when they're going to Ibaka at center, who can give you a bit of the pick and pops that Vucevic gave the Magic in this one. Again, the Bucks, they're going to give you those shots. And we saw last night how that can go for them sometimes, and when you start facing better teams, there's just simply more shooting out there. Now, if I think about that versus like the next round, I think Miami will beat the Pacers. So if you think about Bam, like, can Bam give you the shooting that Vucevic gives you? No. He can go off the dribble a bit, so that could be his way of countering you if you leave him open on some screens. I mentioned the Raptors, of course. The Celtics don't have it as much, so that could be a problem for them. But the other thing, too, that I think Orlando showed a bit, I think we mainly saw this out of Terrence Ross, was using off-ball stuff, pin downs, flare screens, that type of stuff. I think you could have a chance of scoring on Milwaukee with that. Not saying it's going to be easy. I mean, if the Bucks are an A-plus pick-and-roll defense team, then they're probably like an A-minus off-ball defense type of team. But the thing is that they don't really like to switch like that. I'm not saying they never switch, but they like to fight across screens. You know, Coach Buddy's just got that philosophy when it comes to dealing with off-ball screen setting, you know? And so, you look at a team like Miami. They got a lot of off-ball guys. You know, I think Kendrick Nunn can do it a bit. Duncan Robinson certainly can. Tyler Hero, and he already showed some confidence in the first game against the Pacers. And just Spoelstra's game plan in general. It's just a lot of off-ball movement. And if the Bucks are not going to switch that all the time, then I think there is definitely some chances for you to get some good looks that way. Anything to just find offense outside of the simple pick and rolls, because the Bucks have proven that they're just really, really good at that whole thing. Unless you just kill them with pull-ups all day, which is possible. I mean, that's kind of what happened with the Magic last night, too. They made a lot of mid-rangers. You know, Fultz made some, Ross made some, so Vucevic, of course, made some pick-and-pops. And that's not going to happen every game, but with a more talented team, it potentially could happen almost every game for the Bucks. So, yeah, that's kind of the way it can be. The other thing to talk about is Middleton. Wasn't that great? 14 points. I mean, can they technically still win if Giannis is doing his 30-point normal thing and everybody else is chipping in with 15 or so? I mean, they probably can, but it's going to be a lot tougher. And Middleton, I think if you crowd him, if you put a good defender on him, if you swarm him a little bit, I think you can overwhelm him. I think you can force him to make some tough shots, and he can make shots, no doubt, but I do think you can have some success on him, and he didn't have a great first game against the Magic. So yeah, basically, we saw the potential weaknesses for both 1 seeds in the first games of their round 1 series. I think another part of this is also neither one of these teams really cared since they showed up in the bubble. So, for what that's worth, yeah. Anyway, the Bucks are definitely going to beat the Magic. I think the Lakers will beat the Blazers. I'm not too concerned, although depending on how Game 2 goes, I could end up being very concerned for them. And yeah,